Alrighty, hello everybody. This is Austin Sims of the Scientific Origins channel. Hello again and welcome. This is a channel where we discuss science, evolution, the Big Bang, uh, round Earth versus flat Earth, all the science fields that are hotly debated on the internet and that there's lots of misinformation about. And we talk about real science and explain how evolution is a fact, the Big Bang happened, Earth's not flat, it's not a dirt pizza, it's a globe, and so on and so forth. But today we're going to be starting a new series. So I already have a series discussing the general strategy of using tropes and talking points, things like the Gish Gallop or the argumentum ad infinitum. I think it would be a fun and useful thing for my channel to also have some videos systematically debunking some of the many common slogans we hear from people like, evolution deniers, anti-vaxxers, stuff like that. I kind of already have a couple videos doing that, but we're going to make it an explicit series now. And so what we're doing here is we're going to be naming and debunking some of the many common slogans we hear from evolution deniers. And we'll not only label the fallacies and tactics being used, so you can learn more about the manipulative strategy behind the argument in the Tactics and Tropes series on this very same channel, but we'll refute the specific contents of these arguments themselves. For the first video of this series here, I'm going to refute some of my favorite slogans creationists use in their arguments denying the scientifically and empirically supported truth of evolution. If there are specific slogans you would like to see debunked, feel free to post a comment including them. I love looking up things science deniers say because it always ends with me having a better understanding of the reality of science, which they're basically always lying about, whether wittingly or unwittingly. And you can see the three talking points we're going to refute a little bit today. So let's head to the next slide. All right, so as I said previously, my name is Austin Sims. This is the Scientific Origins channel where we bravely and curiously investigate reality and try to see if it matches up to our scientific models and proposals. So yeah, evolution denial is still a thing. Isn't that weird? And part of the reason evolution denial is still a thing is because propaganda mills like to pollute the information ecosystem, and they do. One of the techniques they use to do so is they use these mind warping slogans that are usually short, quippy, and wrong statements that trigger a total cessation of all thinking outside of usually biblical literalism and presuppositional Christianity or Islam in the one who utters them. Statements like, but not limited to, there's no evidence for evolution, evolution is just a pagan, satanic, naturalist religion, evolution isn't science, it isn't observable, testable, or repeatable. The slogans are used not unlike a verbal worry bead that's brandished at scientific facts and reality as an incantation, imploring all of that humans are apes nonsense to just go away and be godless somewhere else. So, to the person within the evolution denying cult, these slogans shine like gold due to a phenomena known as psychological projection. Evolution deniers think we're just tricking to them and we're lying to them, and they relish with sadistic delight the opportunity to use verbal trickery themselves against those outside of their reality denier cult. It's fair game from where they're sitting. We're mocking their wonderful God. So who are we to balk at them using capricious rhetoric to poke us in the eye when we insist on things like empiricism and curiosity and wealth of evidence-based worldview? Christians and theist deniers of evolution of other varieties tend to have what I refer to as scriptural theist brain rot. This can be Bible brain rot, Quran brain rot, or even non-denominational Christian brain rot. I've encountered all of these kinds in significant numbers and other more sui generis kinds as well. And what that really means is just like a combination of cognitive distortions and logical fallacies and cognitive biases. But I collectively refer to them as theist brain rot or Bible brain rot or whatever. And it just means like an extreme blend of overconfidence, ignorance of the subject matter, lack of cognitive flexibility, like an extremely cognitively rigid viewpoint. It's not all those things, but there's more to it than that, but those are some of the most common elements. So it's kind of just a fact of human neurology that a large proportion of us simply can't handle complex ideas. For such a mind, the simplicity of picking one book is the perfect explanation for everything, which covers all that you need to know, and fervently believing it is disturbingly attractive. It beats having to remain curious for the rest of that being's life and to wrestle with to comprehend things that will ultimately fail to understand anyways. Instead, they merely trust in a religious authority, which is allowed with divine license to do all their thinking and moral decision making for them. These slogans come from the areas of the brain that activity that protect that worldview, and is referred to by neurologists and psychologists as motivated reasoning, or even more specifically as identity defensive cognition, which means basically exactly what it sounds like: thinking that's motivated to arrive at a specific pre-selected destination regardless of evidence encountered via examinations and learning, especially specifically the conclusion that one's already selected identity and worldview is the right one or the superior one. Much like stereotypes and propaganda, in general, these slogans tend to fall apart with even just cursory critical examinations. The most fascinating phenomena, though, is when a talking point achieves what is sometimes referred to as fractal wrongness. This is a claim or argument which is so egregiously flawed, so unbelievably ignorant and unknowing, that even though it is but a trite argument that takes just a few moments or sentences to utter, entire semesters of higher learning level educational material could be dedicated just to refuting it. And I'll try to strike some kind of balance on points of this variety in this series. I'll refute them comprehensively enough, and instead of going into full and complete depth and detail, I'll try to direct you to where you can go to get deeper immersion if you desire it. So with that covered, let's get to refuting some science denier talking points, shall we? Well, there's so many talking points that evolution deniers use, and this is one of the most egregious, pernicious, outright bullshit lies that evolution deniers tell. It's so insane to even say this, to say there's no evidence of evolution. Even most creationists don't actually believe that. If you drill down on what they believe, they'll say, oh, we accept microevolution, but we don't accept. So how the fuck is there no evidence of evolution if you accept microevolution? Tell me that, first of all, okay? But no, I should probably try and refrain from cursing, right? It's hard. There's no evidence of evolution. So a lot of times what this is just going to be an appeal to ignorance. This is just somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, just regurgitating what they think is the best thing to say or what they've been told to say, that there's no evidence of evolution. I think it's almost like it's like a gamble, it's a bet. They're hoping that they know almost nothing about evolution, right? So they are hoping that the person they're talking with is at the same level as them, that they also know absolutely nothing about what they're talking about and won't be able to immediately call how full of shit this lie is, a straight up lie. I won't be able to refrain from using the words shit and bullshit, because bullshit is central to what's going on here. So when I say that this may be outright lies or it may be just bullshit, it varies by circumstance, that's exactly what I mean. So in the instance where somebody's just an idiot, doesn't know what they're talking about, has heard from other evolution deniers that there's no evidence for evolution, and is just repeating what they've heard and doesn't realize that it's profoundly, egregiously wrong, right? So that is when it would be just bullshit. Just somebody who doesn't know and doesn't want to accept what you're telling them, just spewing whatever they have to get you to shut up and go away. It can be outright lies. When it's used as a more simple version, it means I don't know shit about evolution, including that there's a mountain of evidence supporting it. But it can be used because usually the person who says that thing, even when you show them the evidence of evolution, they're not going to accept it. At which point, they're going to start using this argument in a different way. They're going to say, oh, yeah, all those things that you say are evidence of evolution are not actually evidence of evolution. They don't count because I still disbelieve it. You haven't proved it to me beyond any doubt whatsoever that this is true. So there's no evidence of evolution, which that's not how fucking science works. Sorry. Nobody has to prove it to you for it to be science. So maybe, get over your arrogance and realize that what you accept and what science is are not the same thing, right? He beautifully sums it up, right? When you say there's no evidence for evolution, you're revealing you really don't know what you're talking about, because look at all this evidence for evolution. We've got the pharyngeal gill structures. We've got homology in the pentadactyl limb, the one bones, two bones, many bones formation, humerus, radius ulna, carpals, metacarpals, intermediate, proximal, intermediate, and distal phalanges, right? This form existing in bats, whales, dogs, cats, dolphins, horses, that's up there in the top left corner. You got the evolutionary tree of life. You've got Darwin's finches in the Galapagos. You've got primate hands. Look at that. You've got more about the pentadactyl homology. You've got horse teeth, the horse species, and the horse hoof. You've got biogeographical distributions there. You've got eye evolution. You've got hominid evolution. You've got the mammalian jaw evolution from synapsodont all the way up to modern conventional mammals with their dentary bone formation. The evidence for evolution is overwhelming, and it's not being accepted because what's on the right side of the screen there, this little verse from the Bible: and God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. Which I have said before, and I'll say again, that creationism is not just bad science, it's bad theology. I don't think this even outlaws evolution. There's an argument you can make where nothing has ever changed kind, even in evolution, depending on how you're defining the term kind, right? Which we actually do. We have a school of evolutionary science called taxonomy systematics, which is how we classify and categorize kinds of living things. But we don't use the term kind. We use more specific scientific terms that have actual functional utility. Next. This is another annoying little eye poke evolution deniers like to use, and it's pretty infuriating on multiple levels, because one is just the wrongness of it, how wrong it is to say that evolution is a religion. It couldn't be farther away from a religion. If it weren't supported by evidence, nobody in the scientific field would use it. If it didn't have functional utility, nobody in the scientific field would use it. The same cannot be said at all for something that's a religion. A religion stays something that people believe in, even if there's no evidence supporting it, even if it has zero functional utility. So unequivocally, it's just wrong. But what it really is, I don't think it's even about really making a strong argument. It's just about triggering. I think a big part of religious brainwashing is just getting the religious people to brainwash themselves. Because you can't go through and brainwash everybody. That takes too much effort. But if you can get them to brainwash themselves, then you don't have to expend all that effort. All you have to do is get them to brainwash themselves and to come to you in times when that brainwashing is failing so you can shore it back up. And in that way, you save a lot of effort and you still keep everybody nice and brainwashed, right? So this is one way that evolution deniers are brainwashing themselves. They'll say evolution is a religion, and they'll often include these many qualifying objectives: pagan, satanic, communist. Evolution is a naturalist religion. It's a satanic religion. You can't miss an opportunity to jam a few fear-invoking buzzwords in that shut down the neocortex and higher order thinking and get the amygdala and the limbic system doing backflips of terror, right? So this one, it definitely includes a couple of logical fallacies. At first, it's definitely a reductio ad absurdum to call a scientific theory a religion. They're not even close to the same thing, right? You are reducing what a scientific theory is to call to a religion in order to call evolution that. So it also smacks of a tu quo que, as if the worst thing an evolution denier can think of is, well, you're religious just like us. Okay, so is religion a bad thing now suddenly? But probably the biggest fallacy that stands out is just the raw equivocation, right? They're just not using words in an honest or accurate way. They're using words in a very dishonest, a very manipulative way. And this is an important point. It's used to relieve emotional distress in the evolution denier's mind. And that distress is generated by the fact that generally they accept worldviews that are supported by science. They accept that your car engine works because of the reason scientists say it does, with combustion and transformation of energy into kinetic energy and the friction between your tires and the road, right? They accept all of that. And so it causes them cognitive dissonance to accept all of a worldview that's almost entirely supported by science and then reject evolution, which is supported by the exact same principles, by the exact same style of empirical evidence, in favor of a worldview that's supported by myth. If they can pretend that evolution and mythology are on the same level instead of the way that it actually is, then that distress can be relieved. So really, this is just an audio worry bead, like we talked about, in its most blatant form, but it can be used in a more elegant form, which is basically just pseudo-historical pedantry and linguistic trickery. Because the fact is, every religion on the planet, all of them, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, paganism, Buddhism, all of them evolved through a process in human prehistory that the evidence strongly indicates went from animism to totemism, then shamanism, then polytheistic paganism, and monotheistic theism and deism. So it starts with animism, with humans in prehistory seeing their sibling or their spouse or their partner, whatever, go from being alive to being dead. And they wondered, there's some natural dualist presupposition, like you can imagine an ancient human looking at its spouse's dead body on the ground and then looking around, wondering where the alive part of them went. And so the theory is that perhaps they looked up at the sky and saw the stars and thought it went up there, or maybe they were making fires around this time and they saw the smoke raise to the heavens and thought that vapor was part of the soul. And so however they came to this conclusion, they decided the soul went up there to a sky realm. And that's how we end up with like up there geography, even though according to most common theologists, God is outside of the universe, so the up there directionality doesn't really work anymore, but that's pedantry, right? So that's animism. And then totemism is when humans start thinking through architecture, art, ritual, that they can create a connection between this realm and that one. That's the totem, right? Then there's shamanism, the eclectic thinker, the thinks he can manipulate the totems, he can manipulate shaman, he can manipulate ritual, art, and chanting and incantation to somehow appeal to the other realm or to connect with the ancestral spirits in that other realm. And basically we're seeing a beginning formation of magic, the idea of intention, incantation, art, dance, ritual, and architecture influencing reality through kind of artistic means, right? And then after shamanism, you get polytheistic paganism. This is where you have the realm, you have souls, you have the totem that is a bridge across. Now humans are starting to envision entities, beings that exist in that other realm. And most of what they do is they collect the souls from this realm and they ferry them across to that realm, or they collect them there and they organize that's the first conception of deities, is these paganistic deities. And this is where the equivocation is happening. You can go that far and for sure be a pagan and accept evolution. There's no problem with it. like everything that has been developed in the spiritual framework up to that point isn't really anti-science. It's just a metaphysical claim that isn't even worried about science, right? It's just trying to answer burning questions humans have in prehistory. Things like, do we have a soul? Where did this thing we're standing on come from? What happens to us when we die? When you get to monotheistic deism and theism, that still contains elements of paganism and shamanism and totemism and all that. So once again, it's not just pseudo historical pedantry and linguistic trickery. Once again, it's just a tu quoque. Like, you're doing the same thing we do. How terrible. A scientific theory, it's not that hard to do. Just look at the research labs. We have the nuclear research lab, the biologist research lab, and the physicist research lab. And all of these are labs that would help us discern evolution. And then you have the creationist research lab on the bottom. That's the one that's actually a religion, you guys. So this isn't really that hard to figure out. You should probably stop telling people this lie or using this bullshit in case you didn't already know it's a fucking lie. All right, so this is a very common one. I hear this one all the time from evolution deniers. Evolution isn't observable, testable, or repeatable. So once again, there's equivocation happening here. There's a straw man happening here. And because it's generally going to be being compared against some type of creationism, it's also going to be a tu quoque. Again, aimed at resolving that emotional ideological distress evolution deniers get when they get an inkling of awareness that evolution is science and what they believe is mythology. So generally, this is going to be used in ignorance. This is being used by someone who doesn't know much about the philosophy of science. They don't know what, falsifiability is. They don't know the scientific method and the intricacies, actually, of the scientific method. They probably think they have like a middle school level understanding of the scientific method. They think the scientific method is a series of steps, and it's the exact same steps every time. You hypothesize, experiment, and it's really not that simple, actually. There's no one exact scientific method, and there's many, many scientific methods. So it's one of those cases where it's simultaneously the truth that there is no scientific method, and there's many scientific methods. They are generally going to be a cycle of proposing ideas, asking questions, hypothesizing, collecting data and experimenting, and then using the data you collect during observing and experimenting to build models, to describe laws and patterns that emerge. So it is generally going to be used in ignorance, but it can be used in pedantry. And when it's being used in pedantry, it's also being used as a straw man. So when it's used in pedantry, it basically turns into a dishonest and they're not going to tell you, hey, I'm being solipsistic right now. I've basically retreated to solipsism. Because a solipsist never will. A solipsist has no morals. They don't even think you're real. So why would they treat you with dignity? Which is why I don't bother talking to solipsists. If you're a solipsist, GTFO. I don't even have time for you. Ain't nobody got time for that. So let's talk about explicitly why the specific elements of this claim are wrong. Evolution is extremely observable. You can observe it looking at trees. You can observe it looking at plants, obligate symbiotes. You can observe it looking at species that are in captivity. You can observe it looking at the fossil record, like what we see right here. This is a very observable example of evolution. And I don't care what creationists say, this is one of the ways in which evolution is observable. They'll say, oh, these are just skulls. This doesn't matter. Well, skulls are something you can observe. Shocker. Use your senses to collect some data about these skulls, and congratulations, presto, changeo, you found a way evolution is observable. Good for you. Testable. So we tested evolution over and over again, and it's passed with flying colors every time. So one of the first examples of how evolution was tested, Darwin, when he was writing his stuff, he was like, man, I don't see a lot of transitional forms in the fossil record. Like, I'm not a paleontologist, but I imagine there will be some of those in there if, we go looking for them, if my theory is true. Like, maybe there's some kind of dinosaur bird type thing. I don't know if he said that specifically. I'm paraphrasing heavily here, as you can probably tell. But 2 years later, they found that dinosaur bird thing, Archaeopteryx, pictured above. The first test of evolution passed with flying colors, showing that evolution does exactly what good science should do. It makes unarbitrary explanations of large sets of data, including this, and it makes successful predictions about future data, including this. So that, and if anybody ever tells you evolution isn't science, Archaeopteryx alone proves that wrong, right? But there's been many subsequent tests. So every time we dig up a fossil that we predict is going to be there before we dig it up, that's testing evolution, and it's passed every test so far. So Tiktaalik is a great example. Cetaceans, whales and dolphins and ocean mammals are a great example. Perissodactyls, the horse evolution line, is a great example. And then genomics and embryology are another way we tested evolution. If, when we looked at genomic comparisons, there was either not significant levels of similarity or arbitrary similarities, like if a lemur was more similar to an orange than it is to a human, that would have disproved evolution. That was a test of evolution that evolution passed with flying colors. Embryology is another test of evolution that evolution passed with flying colors. If evolution wasn't true, we wouldn't expect to see cetacean fetuses like whales and dolphins. We wouldn't expect them to ever develop hind limb buds. They do. Not only do they develop hind limb buds, sometimes they have atavisms, and they have hind limbs even in the developed adult form of the organism. So that's the testability of evolution in a slide. And then we'll talk about repeatability. So this is this is the main thing that this argument is like resting on, is that it's resting on an equivocation that because evolution takes millions or billions of years, it's not repeatable, so it's not observable, so it's not science. Evolution can take millions of billions of years, and it can happen in as few as 40 generations. So that is what Diane Dodd's incipient sexual separation of Drosophila melanogaster experiment proved. That's why that's listed up there. Another example of repeatable evolution is the coprophagous scarabaei mandible diversification experiment. You can evolve new species of beetles from a ancestor species that had no mandible into a species that does have a mandible in observable time spans. Peter and Rosemary Grant, doctors Peter and Rosemary Grant, have been living on the Galapagos for 35 years, studying the finch populations there, which has allowed them to observe as a cactus finch hybridization speciation event occurred. A similar speciation event that occurred in a like 3-decade time span is listed below that. The Nordic mollusk niche partitioning event, when pollution levels in Nordic countries declined because of the passing of new ecological conservation laws, nutrient levels in lakes started to normalize, and where there had previously been 2 mollusk species, an above tide species and a below tide species. One of those species went extinct because of the pollution. The above tide species was eliminated by the change in nutrient levels, and we were left with just the below tide species. But when the law was passed and the lake nutrient levels normalized, scientists predicted that over the next couple of decades, there would be a speciation event, and we'd end up with 2 mollusk species again, an above tide and a below tide one. And then they watched over 30 years as their prediction came true, and there are now 2 mollusk species there, an above tide and a below tide one, a classic example of niche partitioning, and another example of how evolution is repeatable. And then ring species. Ring species are a great observation that shows the repeatability of evolutionary science. We find the species, we find that the species is compatible with another species that's in its geographic location, but other species that we would expect it to be compatible with, it isn't. We realize they're a ring species. So what happens is you have a population in this area, it migrates here, it's able to part of the population migrates, the other part of the population stays in the old location. So species in location A is capable of reproducing with species in location B. You repeat the process, and now you have a species in location C as well. The species in location A is compatible with the species in location B, but it's not compatible with the species in location C, right? Like it's compatible, and that's what we call the ring species. It's an example of observability, repeatability, testability of evolution, and if evolution weren't true, ring species wouldn't exist. Sums up the whole presentation and the 3 points we are refuting here. It's a great meme. I love it. I use it a lot. It shows some of the fossil sequence of the skulls, and it has the caption below explaining that geology shows that these are all different ages. Paleontology shows the sequence of evolution, the list of species. Each adds a number of changes to the basal species, ending with the derived species, and taxonomy shows the relationships we'd expect. These are all primates, archont group mammals, and evolution is the explanation that threads it all together, and evolution denial is just squeezing your eyes shut, and whaling does not. So that's the first of a series refuting creationist talking points. Again, feel free to post a comment with some creationist talking points you want to see refuted, and I'll try and get some links in the description to other videos you can go into for more depth on the points discussed here. But for now, we're just going to call this one done and dusted and say thanks for stopping by the Scientific Origins channel, where we bravely and curiously explore reality and see if the data we collect matches our proposals and models, and we tell the truth about it to the internet, where there's lots of people lying about it. So thanks for stopping by. Do hit the like and subscribe. Support me in all the free ways. Comment, poke, get my name tattooed on your forehead and scream like a psychopath about how great my channel is in public. And thanks very much.